Test. All right, it's 3:01 on September 4th, Tuesday, meeting of the Architecture Advisory Committee. We ask everyone to silence their cell phones. Planning Director, if we can have roll call, please.
Certainly, Madam Chair. Member Cassidy is excused. Member Dosey?
Present.
Member Lockyer? Member McCoy?
Present.
Member Rotman?
Present.
Vice Chair Jakeway?
Present.
And Chair Song.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. May we have the staff report on the posting of the agenda?
Madam Chair, the agenda was posted on Thursday, August the 30th. This meeting has been noticed and posted in accordance with state law.
Thank you. Does the committee have any revisions to the agenda for today? Okay, if there are no revisions, can we move to accept the agenda?
I so move.
Thank you, John. A second?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Tom. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. Did I call you John? Okay. All right, since this is a public meeting, audience members are permitted to comment on any issue that is within this committee's purview. Comments on an item appearing on today's agenda are made at the time the item is presented. If you want to speak on an item that is not on today's agenda, you may speak now. Each speaker has 3 minutes. I see that there's none, so therefore we're going to proceed to the meeting minutes of our last meeting.
Let's see. Madam Chair, just by way of business, you have 4 items on your consent calendar. You have the minutes of June 18th, July 2nd, and July 16th. And then item number 2 is also on the consent agenda. It only requires 1 motion for all 4 items.
Thank you, Flynn. So let's start with June 18, 2018. Tom Dosey, Sean Locklear, McCoy, and Rodman. I'm sorry, those are the excuse. Jakeway, Pauline, Cassidy, and Song. We don't have enough.
Madam Chair, we will need to continue those minutes until the next meeting as we don't have a quorum
Okay.
on the approval of those minutes. Let's go to the minutes of July the 2nd.
Correct. Any revisions or comments?
Let's see, I'm just looking at the attendance, and it looks like we don't have a quorum on those minutes
Oh,
either.
you're correct.
And then let's go to the minutes of July 16th. Let's see.
I think it's the same
And
case.
we do have a quorum there. Members Dosey, McCoy, Rotman, and Jakeway were in attendance, so if there's any changes to those minutes, we will have those 4 members vote on the minutes.
Okay, I would manage that. However, I don't have any comments because I was absent. So any comments on those meeting notes?
No, I reviewed the minutes and I had no comments. No comments.
Okay, all right. So is there a motion to accept the agenda and the meeting notes?
Are we combining it with the number 2?
Correct.
Okay. I so move to approve the meeting minute notes of July 16th, as well as item number 2, Dan Spencer on behalf of James Burba and Robert Hayes.
Thank you. Anyone second?
Second.
Tom Dosey. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you.
Okay. And we will note that Chair Song abstained on the vote for the minutes of July 16th. Just as a reminder for the AAC committee members, you need to have your microphone positioned right in front of you. Otherwise, the recording will not pick up your comments. So please, again, have those directly in front of you.
Thank you. Okay, so let's move to new business item 3 by 5 Palm Springs LLC, request for a conditional use permit and a major architectural application to construct a 36-unit hotel in Palm Springs. Staff report, please.
Yeah, just a minute, Madam Chair. All right, good afternoon, members of the AAC. Just a very brief background of this project. For the members that were with the committee back in 2016, you will recall that at that same location, another conditional use permit for a different concept of hotel was approved at that same site. You reviewed and recommended approval to the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission did approve that project. The applicants are the same, but this project before you today is slightly different, of a different concept than what you previously approved in 2016. So this is for a 36-unit hotel. Those 36 units will be considered of 2 to 4 bedrooms each, and these units will be suites. In other words, they contain kitchen and other living facilities that you would normally find in an extended type of stay hotel. So that's what's before you today. Just a quick background again. After reviewing this, staff, there are no particular issues surrounding the proposal or the design itself. This is within Section 14, so some of the design standards that are applied to this project will be slightly different than what you would normally see. For instance, the height. So the maximum height of this project is 35 feet. Normally, that is not the same as what you will see if this were to be located in a non-Section 14 area. So that's just a big background. We do not have particular issues, but there is just one minor issue that I would like to bring to your attention. I brought this and I discussed it with the representative of the applicant, Mr. Lance O'Donnell. He might have a different, or might be able to persuade you to have a different take on this. So here is the exhibit that you have on the monitor right now is the overall site plan. Let me just go there to the part. So the layout will consist of 4 main buildings. One of them is a separate standalone building. That's Building A, that fronts an Indian Kenya. This is a 2-story building that will serve as a gathering place. It is also referred to as a common building. It will be the lobby, the main lobby, where guests will check into the hotel. It also will have a cafe and a bar, and we have like a banquet hall for events and other activities will be taking place in that standalone building that faces Indian Canyon. And then there is this small storage building. That's the one that staff is a little bit uncomfortable with. I just feel that that may not be the most appropriate location to site a storage. But again, the architect will explain the rationale behind their reasoning here. So these are the rest of the buildings. Even though they are connected, there are really 3 separate 3-story buildings. There's Building B, C, and then D. Those are the 3 main buildings that will constitute the main body of the hotel. And of course, I mentioned that there will be a resort type of swimming pool and then an event space that is located on this site. The other issue that staff has noted in the memo to you has to do with parking, but the AAC will have nothing to do with that, as they have prepared a parking study and a parking plan that will be presented to the Planning Commission for adoption if they are comfortable with the amount of parking spaces that has been proposed or provided by the applicant. So that's the site plan itself. I also noted in your staff report that the main ingress into the hotel will be off Indian Kenya. This is only a one-way driveway, and the exit will be, the egress is along South Encilia. So that constitutes the overall site plan. In your package, I do have the material board, but I just want to go real quick and show you the other parts of the exhibit before we call on the applicant. So these are the floor plans of the hotel. So the one on the bottom is the 2nd floor, and the one at the top is the 3rd floor. It shows the number of rooms in each of the floors, and in each of the floors. That's right. This is the overall roof plan of the hotel. And these are the various elevations. So I did mention in the staff report that one of the north elevations, I believe, yeah, this is the north elevation. And I feel that there could be a little bit more articulations to make it a little bit more interesting, although the location of the north elevation is not very visible from the public right-of-way. It is adjacent to the existing hotel, if I'm right. Yeah, so again, I know the architect may have a difference of opinion and may be able to persuade you that this is acceptable. And this is the landscape plan here. We do not have particular issues, but I just felt that more shrubs could be added to the landscape mix. Other than that, the trees are appropriate for the site. And then perhaps there could be more trees to provide shade at the parking area there. So these are just the sections that denote the various heights of the building. They are all consistent with the Section 14 height requirements. And these are the 3D views. So that we conclude my staff report. If there are any questions, staff will be available to answer those. And the applicants and their reps are also here to make a presentation to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward. Questions for staff? Oh, okay, sorry. Let's start with Member Tom.
Edward, is there a specific parking requirement for hotels in town, or that varies per project?
According to the code, Section 14 refers back to the Palm Springs zoning code. So what it says is that, for instance, the first 50 rooms will have 50 parking spaces. This hotel does, when you go by that, they do meet that requirement. However, recall that there is a banquet hall and there are gathering spaces there that is open to the public. So because of that, there might be need for additional parking spaces. The same issue came up during the first hotel that was approved in 2016, and we had the same issues, but they were able to address those with a parking study that the Planning Commission accepted as being sufficient for the site.
As I look at the plans, to me it seems this is more of an apartment house than it is a hotel. We're building two-bedroom units, three-bedroom units, and four-bedroom units. Is there something within the zoning where you can control that it is rented out on a nightly basis and it doesn't convert to apartments?
No, there is no specific, if I'm correct, if I'm maybe...
Actually, let me jump in. Much like, and unfortunately you didn't have the opportunity to see the last proposal where they had 14 units that each had between 5 and 7 bedrooms. So it wasn't a standard hotel configuration, nor is this your standard hotel configuration. However, because they do require a conditional use permit, we can place limitations on the use in the conditions of approval for the conditional use permit. So yes, there is the ability to do that. And so, again, the purview of the Architectural Advisory Committee is to look at the layout of the site and the architecture and materials, et cetera. You all, as the Architectural Advisory Committee, don't need to worry about the number of parking spaces per se, but you do need to look at the configuration of the parking and how that functions with the site. And again, there will be limitations placed from the Planning Commission review on the operation of the use, and a parking study will be reviewed at that time.
It seems to me that instead of looking at a 36-unit hotel, we're looking at an 80-bedroom project. Does it make more sense to discuss it in terms of the number of bedrooms, because that will identify the number of occupants and the number of...
To a certain degree, it might. However, the units have been configured so that, one bedroom may be a lockout unit where it can be rented separately, with the other portion of the unit, which may include 2 or more bedrooms, not being able to be rented separately. What I'll ask is to have the applicant to get into more detail in terms of how the units are configured and to address that for you as the AAC.
Thank you.
Okay, Member Tom, do you see any questions for staff?
I think Mr. Jakeway asked the same question I was looking at, so thank you.
Okay. Member Roberts.
Edward, on the parking shading, isn't there in the zoning code, you're supposed to have a tree every X number of spaces?
No, that's not the way our code is written, but that there is a percentage that is required. So in looking at it, it does appear to me that percentage that it should be at, when those trees are fully mature, they will be able to provide adequate shade, but I just felt that if they add more trees to it, that will help, it would help.
Yeah, I was under the impression it was something like every six car you needed a tree, but maybe I'm missing.
But I can go back and review that anyway.
All right,
so.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Member John, any questions for staff? Okay. Thank you, Edward. Is the applicant present? Name and address for others who have not done this before.
Lance O'Donnell, 1089 North Palm Canyon Drive. Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and committee and staff. I'd just initially like to thank Edward for jumping on this and getting this to you in a timely manner. We're, as a group, I'm representing some others, the builders here, the developers here, the landscape architects here. And so as questions come up, other more knowledgeable people in those areas may want to address certain issues. But let me just start out by talking about the intent of the hotel. It is a hotel, and it's intended to bridge between what the city has seen and many cities have seen as the vacation rental boom, where the neighborhoods start getting impacted by folks coming in for short-term rentals. And they typically come with multiple family members or extended family. And that seems to be a key component of the traveling public now. And so this hotel, whether it's a single couple or whether it's a larger family, it can accommodate that kind of new territory in hotels where we can place a bunch of people in one co-located spot. So relative to parking and the demands on parking, much of what we anticipate happening is family members showing up from various locations around the country and coalescing here at this resort. And as they do that, one or none may show up in an automobile. They may be using Uber and Lyft, and they may be showing up in various configurations. So let me just kind of address the architecture after kind of making that brief statement. And I appreciate Edward's attention to the various components here. We really see this as one unified piece of architecture. And while we have termed them building A, B, C, and D, that was more internally to think about how we start to incorporate the systems into the building, and we address some of the fire issues and some of the other things that we had to address. But the buildings are based upon pad heights, and we have about 4 feet of grade change between Indian Canyon and Encilia. So we had to accommodate that 4 feet into various steps in the building. So when we talk about B, C, and D, those buildings are stepping about a foot each. And so they're very slowly and gently taken up in the east-west direction of the building. Then to address the street and Indian Canyon, the Indian Canyon street frontage was really one of unifying the north-south perspective into the building. As we all know, there's various speeds that one will approach the building. There's the pedestrian speed at 2.5 to 3 miles an hour. There's the 35-mile-an-hour car going by, and there's the 15 to 20-mile-an-hour bike. And we wanted to address each of those speeds with the building. And at the current at the present time, this is a one-way approach to Indian Canyon. We don't know in the future whether this will be two-way or one-way, but it's set up to accommodate either Indian Canyon being two-way or one-way. It's one-way today, and it may be that way for for the near future. The building then breaks down into an entry arrival point that creates a bridge, and that bridge by nature has to accommodate trash trucks and folks showing up with maybe a van with bike racks on top. So it's quite high. We've got about 14 and a half feet, which is the basic Caltrans bridge height to get underneath that bridge element. What we've termed as storage on the northwest corner is really just an anchor element. It's read and perceived as a mass and not so much a daily storage thing where folks are going over there with carts and picking up linens or doing laundry in there. It'll probably be more longer-term storage for the event spaces when the event space needs to get set up in a particular way. The longer-term storage would likely or may likely go in that location. And it's really reading as an anchor or a mass to terminate the roof. So the roof being the entire length of the north-south direction of Indian Canyon helps to break down the height of that entry piece. So because we have the length and we have the 35-mile-an-hour car moving past, we wanted to make sure that the architecture was collected and cohesive along Indian Canyon. And then to address a bit of the parking and the configuration, we initially had angled parking in there, thinking that we would have a one-way drive in there. And when we started working with the fire department and worked out all of the various requirements for widths, we then turned the parking back to 90 degrees. We currently still think of the drive aisle as one way, although I think, Edward, in the staff report, it says we would probably have some kind of controlled gating at the east end. We're no longer thinking that's necessary. We may do that, but this could very easily, by city standards, be a two-way drive, although we're thinking about it currently as a one-way drive just for ease of movement and Celia happens to be a nice little collector, and one could get back out onto Palm Canyon or out onto Indian Canyon quite easily. So that's a one-way drive as we have it. There's a widened configuration area for the fire truck. Additionally, we have that gentle slope along there. We have enhanced paving going in there, although we haven't really worked out that configuration yet. But that drive aisle is intended to be an enhanced paving. It'll probably be interlocking pavers, modern interlocking pavers mixed with some kind of decorative colored concrete. Additionally, to address the concern of maybe somewhat of an understated north elevation, Edward, can you kind of toggle to that view, maybe the colored view? One more. So the top view is a partial of the north elevation, and the second view down is the other half. So one can imagine that this is a very long elevation. And what we're trying to do there is we're providing a screen, a perforated screen. We haven't identified exactly what that screen will be, but the intention is to have some kind of diaphanous element there that would glow at night. And what we're trying to do is we're thinking about electric lighting, subtle, very, very subtle electric lighting along that edge. So we would have a slight glow at night, and during the day, being on the north side, it would be daylit indirectly by indirect north light coming into those walkways. So it's a single loaded building along here, and the walkways are along that edge, and they're back behind that perforated screen. The perforated screen is broken down into modules, and those modules allow relief in and through that screen element. And then as one traverses further to the east, then we start to see the front elevation of the courtyard building. So the building at the extreme east renders itself as a courtyard where towards Indian Canyon and 2/3 of the way back into the site, it really is a single loaded building. The orientation allows us to have balconies, private balconies onto the pool side, facing south, facing into Tockwitz Canyon, Indian Canyon, and then up to Southridge. So it does have this wonderful aspect of those iconic Palm Springs views, both day and night. So very private to the north, which the Las Brisas Hotel we back onto. Our parking along the northern edge of our lot will immediately have a landscape presence because of what is happening on the property to the north. So there's a ficus hedge or some kind of very mature growth that's happening all along that edge, so that the privacy between our property and the property to the north already has an immediate buffer. To our south, the old Goodyear tire currently is being considered by our team. In the future, our team may be looking at how to repurpose that property, potentially incorporating into some kind of other use that's consistent with this hotel use. That pretty much outlines the architectural concepts here. I'm happy to answer additional questions that you might have on any materials or any other aspects. We, as a firm, have been working here in town over 20 years, and this is the first time that we've been able to do a new hotel. New hotels are difficult projects to pull off in our community because there's so many old hotel stocks that need to be remodeled, and we've worked on no less than 15 of those hotels starting in 1998 with the Orbit Inn. So we've had long experience in rehabilitating old hotels, and this is our first experience with a ground-up hotel, and we're really looking forward to adding to that hotel stock. It's something that's much needed. The concept here with larger spaces, having kitchens, having living rooms, having modest dining rooms and decks for families, we think is a much needed, and I won't call it a niche, but it is something that's a little different than what we see in many of the other hotels we've worked on. So if you have any additional questions for me, I can stick around up here, and I know the development team, the landscape architect, and the builder are all here. So thank you.
Thank you, Lance. Let's see, is there anybody here to make comments on this project? Anyone? Okay, so we'll have questions for Lance. When we have questions about landscape or site or development, if you can come up and mention your name and address, that would make the process go a lot smoother. Okay, so I will start with Member Tom. Questions for the applicant.
Thank you. On the site plan, there's looks like a large hardscape area that's east of the reception building. So it would be west of the landscape area near the water feature. What is the purpose of that area? It looks like a stairway adjacent to it, but it's just like a large gray square.
So Tom, are you referring to?
Yes.
Hello? Okay. So that outline there is the second story of our event space. So it's partially covered outdoor area, and it's intended that outdoor gathering, dining, bar, service area would happen in this hardscape. There's probably a view. Edward, can you go? There's a sectional view that shows that. No, go back. Please, keep going, keep going. So, Tom, it's right in this area. One more, please. The other way. We'll get there. All right, one more. Okay. So this is the second story of the event space. The stair that we see coming down is an egress stair, and it's this area bounded in here. So the clear glass onto the indoor gathering area and then onto Indian Avenue occurs through this transparent area here. Second floor up here, there's elevated breakout space and stargazing. And then down in this area, it's just intended to be hardscape dining bar area.
Multifunction
Yeah.
area, okay. And on the same elevation at the top, your grade line shows the slope, you know, the change in grade from Indian going east. Is that a raised planter that we see, like a stone raised planter with plant material?
It is a raised planter with plant material. It has a break here, obviously, at the front of the building. It has a break here between building B and C, and then it has another break down here. So it has, if this were configured as the full elevation, you'd see logical breaks sequentially through that area.
And so that's buffering the parking lot, and then behind that is the walkway adjacent?
Is walkway adjacent,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Member John, questions for the applicant? Okay. Member Robert? Okay. Member Tom?
Lance, was any, excuse me, any consideration given to putting the parking on the southern side of the project? Right now, the parking is against that very tall, long wall, where if the project as it is were just pushed up against the north property line and the parking were against the south, as you parked, I think you'd have a much more appealing approach to the building. Was that anything you considered?
The team looked at that early on, and because we don't really know what's going to happen to the south,
That's what I thought.
it became more difficult for us to kind of predict how to handle that. So we knew we could control the north, and if we set the north up and put the bulk of the building where we knew we could maintain sight lines and we knew we could maintain other outdoor activities and not having to look over our own parking lot, it seemed like a better use of the
Well,
overall
knowing that
circulation.
you possibly have control of that property, it does make total sense
Yeah.
what you're doing. One thing that I'm at a disadvantage, because these drawings are so small in scale, I don't see things like storage rooms and maid service and mechanical equipment, pool equipment. Is that in here and I'm just not seeing it, or are these still need to be massaged to make all that exist?
I can point out several of those items. So we have these corridors coming through here are just on the ground level. When we go up to the second and third floors, they become janitor spaces. So that whole portion in there becomes janitor space. The pool equipment, we were just talking earlier today, is going to be located in a way to keep the noise and the other elements as far away from all of the activity in the sleeping rooms. And with this open event space, they'll be able to deal with turning this thing on and turning it off as it, you know, as there might be something impacting that. So pool equipment and other things are going on over here. We are using some of the current technology in the little mini split air conditioning units, and those are going to be housed on the roof. So there'll be 3 of those small little cassette units in each one of these little pop-ups here. It's intended that there could be some additional screening that may be required on those pop-ups, but that's kind of ideally where those are placed. And they're internal to each one of these spaces. And we have chases where we can run the line sets directly down in. So we've got gas meters, electric meters all this stuff is being sub-metered, so we don't have big banks of stuff like you would have in an apartment complex. So we're using these technologies to co-locate a bunch of things and then minimize the number of individual pieces that one might think we would have.
One thing that I don't quite understand is, as somebody is arriving to check in, how do they do that? Where do they leave their car? How do they get to the lobby? You know, some hotels will have a temporary parking space. I know at the Rowan and the Arrive, they modified the sidewalk so that they could do a park up, but that would entail pulling your building back. What's your intent for how people do that?
Well, with the technology that's going to be employed with this hotel, there won't be the old-fashioned formal check-in. So you won't arrive and keep the kids in the car until you know, some family members checked everybody in and then find your room. You will already know what room you have by the time you arrive, and there won't be any need to come to the front building. So the way we envision it, folks will either get dropped off, taxi, Uber, Lyft, and then find their way into the room, or go right to one of the parking spaces and then have already found out online where their room is and how to get there.
Last question, in the bottom left corner, it says trash. Is that dumpsters that will be pulled out onto Indian Avenue? How will that be serviced?
Right now we have two options. We've got the main trash located back here in that northeast corner, and it's intended that the trucks will pull in this way, and then trash will be pulled out, and they'll just be able to fork immediately in. Here we've located recycled trash and other things up there to allow the restaurant to have a little bit more functionality. So the idea there is that if we determine going forward that the impact's going to be that we really need to work with the waste management folks to figure out how to get larger bins out to the street, we will. But right now it's just a temporary housing until we can get everything to the back of the property. So it's a functional thing at the moment, and we're kind of working through exactly how that's going to work operationally. But we know, and having designed two of these into the property, it's much better than just designing one. And this isn't the location that's ideal for odors and other things. This is much, much better. So we're trying operationally to figure out how to make that one back there service the whole property.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, Lance, on that driveway, have you considered any traffic calming devices because it's so linear, and one would encourage speeding up down east?
The enhanced paving that we talked about will be potentially creating a rhythm of various points that are broken up in here. But as far as traffic calming, like speed humps or something, we haven't really thought about that.
But right where you have the major gateways into your buildings and then the courtyard, you can come out with a choker so that it provides a break so that when I'm driving down, I can see these chokers and slow down. So
you want to
it's
go
not-
with me and talk to the fire marshal? We'd love to choker that thing down.
If you have an emergency gate that's 16 feet wide,
Uh-huh.
you can
Yeah.
have a choker.
Yeah. And we'll continue to study that. What we were told was just provide unobstructed access through that thing. We had a really nice little angled element going through here that kind of got shot down. So maybe there's a possibility of elevating these portions as they go through here. But yeah, it's a fair comment. It is long. We think with pavement we can make it very interesting, especially because we have these corridors where folks will be looking down on it, and it is another opportunity for design.
The other thing is the planters that are designing to demarc the separation between car and then also where the walkways are. Why just the low shrubbery? Why not trees? So let me tell you, I like walking on driveways, especially when they're nicely designed and paved. I feel like I'm one with the car. So if I was delineated also by the trees, it would create shade in the driveway, as well as breaking off the continuous exterior elevation of your building, so that it would break off, just like you have already the lollipops that you're showing, but perhaps you could have 3 times the amount, so that that street can become, or driveway can be much more alive. Have you considered that?
William, what do you think?
I have a
thought. Hi, William Kopelk, 200 East Francis Drive, Palm Springs. I'm the landscape architect of this project. And I think this is my 3rd or 4th landscape hotel project with Lance. So the idea about the landscape itself that really wasn't brought up, but it is really integral and important, is how do you pull the entire site? You've got many different things going on all together, and the landscape plan, I feel, does that. And to address your question about the raised planter, the idea was that we would mass Spanish lavender all the way down, so that you get the visual and the scent of it. And then along here, we're massing all the way down citrus, so again you get the scent and the visual, because the idea was to create sort of a modern Mediterranean plantscape. So that's why that occurred that way. But really there's no reason I couldn't go ahead and put some more of the shade trees in here. These shade trees are the same ones I used at the Ace Hotel, the Desert Museum Palo Verde. And the reason I used those was because they create a really wonderful canopy for parking under, and it's filtered, and they don't really damage the cars at all. So one of the other things I did want to point out was we have high palm trees to really pull in the vertical element here. And then when you're walking, you've got 3 sort of specific zones. You've got your patio, you've got your pool, and you have your event area. So all those sort of have to be integrated somehow, and that's what the landscape does with this. And even over here on the interior courtyard, you've got 4 very tall palm trees because you've got 3 levels looking down and a very simple little reflecting pool. So it brings in those aspects of the Mediterranean that way. And the trees would be date palm, Mexican fan palm, and the Palo Verde. But your suggestion was if we put one there, there, and there, that it would create an LA. Was that right? Yeah, I think that's a really great idea. And the next time we take a look at this, we'll go ahead and contemplate doing that.
And William, about the surrounding area, hardscape around the pool,
Right.
I see there are 2 tall palm trees, as you're mentioning about emphasizing the verticality.
Right.
Why not more of that along emphasizing the linearity of the pool layout?
Well, actually, there's some here, and there's some here. So there are quadrants of 3.
Are they not shown on the plans, but that's your design?
Yeah, they're shown on this plan. It's maybe difficult to distinguish what's more vertical and what is less vertical.
Right, but the distance between those palm trees are 60 feet?
Something like that. It may be 30 feet, I think. We could look at, integrating more palm trees as well. The idea was we wanted to make sure that we address the verticalness of it, but not interrupt the views of the mountain. So that's why it was sort of a...
But you could also frame it, too.
Absolutely, and I was hoping that's what we were accomplishing by doing that. But we can certainly look at... I mean, for example, that's why there's nothing vertical in the event area.
Sure,
Yeah.
but it's surrounded by
Yeah.
it, yeah.
So we could take a look at that.
Okay, and William, also, on Palm Canyon,
Right.
so talk to us about the design concept on the sort of low desert grass.
Right here?
Yeah.
That is, well, as we know, it's west-facing, which is very, very hot for probably 5 months out of the year. And you've got windows there as well. And that really was, it's almost a botanical treatment of the desert landscape and the elements that will grow there. So it's things like Yucca rostrata, agaves, different kinds of agaves, that kind of thing, so that it's low water, low maintenance, and it's a slow-growing plant material.
Yeah, but you do some beautiful work. I was wondering the use of boulders or the use of stone.
That would also be in there.
Okay.
I use a lot of boulders here.
Yeah, and also, do you change the elevation, the grade to?
Sometimes. I find the boulders really do it well. And also I did want to point out, I think we have almost a 4-foot difference of elevation starting here, going all the way down here. And it's really up to the landscape to provide the sensory experience with the visual, the scent, and the texture.
Okay, good. Thank you. I have some more questions for Lance.
Really?
Yeah.
No more for me?
Madam
Not
Chair,
right now, sorry.
Madam Chair, I have a
Oh,
question.
oh, yeah,
Couple
no.
questions for the landscape architect.
William, don't go. Sorry.
Hi.
Hi. On the site plan, there's 2 colors designated there, and I'm kind of zooming in where the units are themselves. There's the gray color that appears to be walkways and deck area, and then there's a lighter tan color, but could you take us through those areas that are adjacent to the units? Are those patios? Are they
Right here?
landscape?
Is this
Yeah,
it?
correct. Yeah, they go all along there, and I'm just trying to understand how those
They
work.
are hardscape, and then there's more further planting on the interior of those.
So Tom, the darker gray is private, and the lighter gray is more public. So the walkways are public, and then there's these, it's a mixture of public and private as you go back into there. So there'll be potted plants and plant material that are sitting in pots, but most of that is under some pretty deep overhangs. So we're thinking, potted and other elements in there, but no real planting beds.
Are those? Is there a blow up of one of those? I mean, what I'm seeing is, are they to be furnished with patio furniture or fire pits or what? They're large areas, and I'm just trying to understand maybe what they're going to be utilized for, and if there's the opportunity to get some additional greenery, even shade-tolerant plants.
Yeah, no, those are all good concepts, and we have some sketches for how those private patios would be used, but unfortunately, with the scale of the overall documents that we're required to provide, those just didn't get into the package.
Okay.
What question?
Thank you.
Okay, William, you're popular. Member Robert.
What's the rationale behind the location of the event area?
I think it came really out of. Edward, can you go please to the perspective views? It really came out of this notion of how do we anchor the hotel along Indian Canyon. And so we have this very natural organic stone with this element sitting on top of it. And it felt like, from a massing point of view, it felt like a really nice way to introduce the property along Indian Canyon and then just let the rest of the roof be subtle and quiet. So we have the deck up here. We have the 2-story mass at the corner, and then the rest of the hotel just sort of breaks down naturally into the next property. In the foreground here is currently the old Goodyear building, and it's got some parking, back to about here. We don't know what's going to happen there in the future, but if it stays like that, there'll be a really nice sight line onto what we think of as one of the more handsome aspects of the project. So,
I was actually referring to the lawn area, the event lawn area.
oh, the event lawn area?
Yeah. And why is it so far back in the site as opposed to closer to the restaurant, catering, all that sort of thing?
Can you tell I like to talk about architecture? It's lawn, it's flat, it's multi-purpose. We originally thought we'd put a building in there, or there'd be some kind of pavilion sitting in there. But the development team said, really, we want to have the flexibility to put all kinds of things in there, and to bring in temporary buildings that could be set up, or temporary tent or tinsel structures. So it's just a flat area that felt like the level of activity here for bar and dining, pool activity, and then as we go further and further back in, more quiet moments could be just better controlled back here versus the only real option we had was flip-flopping these. And it just felt like the activity wanted to be pool and bar dining, then have some distance between those two.
Okay, thanks.
So, Lance, north exterior elevation, these screens, metal work that you are you proposing that every one of them would be the same design, or every third will be the same? Because in the material you have, for example, 3 different designs. I think what you suggested is that it's going to be something like that, but it hasn't been designed. So in that whole length, there's about 18 of them. I don't know. Would they all be the same design? Would they all be the same color?
Yeah, we've looked at a lot of things for this. We even contemplated the idea of a super graphic in perforated metal that could say something or say a lot of things very subtly. What we arrived at was this idea that looking at the Mediterranean design, I think we had this term in the office of, Jeff, what were we calling that stuff? The mesquite, Moroccan twigs. So if you think of a canopy structure that one might find in the Mediterranean that was made out of indigenous found materials, that screen wants to have that kind of quality where it's not highly refined. It doesn't feel precious, and it's reflecting this idea. If we could lash together a bunch of twigs and create something that's more 3-dimensional than 1-dimensional or 2-dimensional. I mean, one of the things I don't react well to is a flat surface that is just a punched flat surface. It wants to have some 3-dimensional quality to it, almost like a bunch of twigs, weaving in and out. Whether we'll be able to achieve that at the end of the day, that's the goal. Something that has some depth to it, but that is not uniform throughout, but is made of the same material, has the same opacity, translucency, openness, but where that openness is occurring is more random.
But I think what I gather is that when I look at that elevation, that finesse of these vertical blades coming down and bearing in width, it's almost washed out because it's white. So this intricacy that you're talking about, this natural material that's going to be weaved together and it's going to be 3-dimensional, it really depends on what color it is, or otherwise you're going to lose it if it becomes white again. So if you're giving me the hope that it's going to be something that is not white, then I can see some depth and I can see some play with, you are fooling us with perspective, right? There's this balcony beyond, there's a wall beyond. But if you leave it white, I think it's going to be read as if it is a monotonous elevation, which I don't think that's what you want to achieve.
Yeah, we've done quite a bit of studies on this, and this rendering, this view happens to be, either early in the morning or late in the afternoon in the summertime when the sun's coming up east, or it's coming up north of east, or setting north of west. Most of the time, this is going to be in shadow. And that's when this notion of the 24-hour aspect of this wall became very important to us. So the idea of electric light and how that electric light might filter through that screen at night. Because the reality is, whether it's white or brown or tan or gray, it's in shadow. It's just in shadow. We've popped the top up. We had light coming, low sun, winter sun coming through, high angle summer sun coming through, trying to get some liveliness through this thing. But the reality is it's facing north. So it's going to be a quiet element no matter what we do. And I think at some point, it's more about the electric light filtering through at night and the tactile quality during the day, being up close to it and not being a super graphic or something that you stand back and you see some big statement. I think it's going to be read in small perspective views, and then it's going to be read really up close and tactily from the inside. So, I hear what you're saying. It's something we struggle with, but the reality is on the north side, and it's just going to be in shadow. So the color...
Would you be open to removing one of three clusters so that now more of a horizontal element is seen through?
My goal is to plug this more than expose more of it, just so that there's more of this sense of mystery of walking along there. Not, I see a person, the person slightly dissipated. I see a person. Mm-hmm. So the rhythm that I imagine there is more of a veiled experience, and not trying to get kind of a syncopated rhythm of people walking by, but just this. I think we've broken it up as much as feels right from the privacy and what we're trying to do with access to each one of the sleeping rooms.
Okay. And so when it comes to the louver details, what do you have in mind by the stairways?
In a perfect world, we'd be oiling teak 3 times a year, and it'd be beautiful. The reality is nobody wants to deal with that level of maintenance. Mm-hmm. So probably at the end of the day, we'll do metal, and we'll find a warm pink color that resembles teak as closely as possible without sponge painting it or faux painting it. It'll be something that feels warm from a distance.
Okay, and is that the same material on the poolside balcony?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, and on the elevation facing the west elevation facing Indian, let's see, the other view, west elevation. Okay, so the stargazing rooftop, is that white parapet because you're trying to create the guardrail?
Yeah. So the white plastered element is the better option that we had to seeing a lot of feet and legs and activity going on up there. It wanted to be a little bit more private. There's, as I mentioned earlier, there's great views to Tahquitz Canyon. There's great views due west. There's views, but the views happen to be over the parking structure and happen to be over some pretty big masses that exist down there. So the downward view to the street didn't seem as important as the ridgeline view. So yeah, it's solid. It's tending to keep it so that it's clean up there and not busy with a lot of furniture and a lot of activity.
You have this beautiful, very simple pavilion structure right in the front that houses the bar. And that element, and it's really well seen where you have the storage, where you have this vertical and then turns and it comes that way. And I think the very thing of this guardrail wall is not enhancing the purity of that pavilion look, in my opinion. And I understand, well, there's going to be people up there, but could that guardrail recede more and let the sort of the continuous fascia line be read?
We were challenged by our client to look more at Timeless Mediterranean than to look at what our natural instincts in Palm Springs are, which is exactly what you described, which is to have a very strong continuous fascia or an element that wraps over and then wraps down. So we're being challenged to look at that fresh. And the only thing that I'd really offer here to the committee is we've worked a long, long time with the modern elements of architecture, and we're going to get this thing right. Whether that mass gets pushed back and that element reads, or there's something else that interrupts that long, clean line, we continue to work on it, and we continue to be challenged in a really great way. So our challenge is to create something that feels very desert, that feels like it belongs in the continuum of modern architecture here in the desert, but isn't necessarily seen as the kit of parts from mid-century. And so we continue to work on that. And there is a mass element there that is a little bit contrary to that thin line, but we're challenged to continue to work on that and get it right. And like I said, our goal at the end is to have something that feels timeless.
Okay, other questions? Yes, Member Tom.
Lance, picking up on Maria's comments about the grill work on the north elevation, I very much like your concept of the woven textural shape. I think the concept of a graphic, nobody will be able to get far enough away to really appreciate. But what I'm struggling with to interpret in these elevations is the screening basically flush with the balcony rails or the walkways behind it? And I'm wondering, could those be little pop-outs where maybe they're 18 or 24 inches deep, so you get some movement and some texture along there, and even then get a little side return to that screening? And I think it might make that elevation seem not so flat. Mm-hmm. And then the other comment is, again, with the screening, the concept of that balcony rail that we're seeing on the west, could that be replaced with the screening in a horizontal situation instead of a vertical? So you're bringing a bit of that screening element onto the west elevation? Just some ideas.
Edward, can you go back to the west elevation? So these elements here, and Tom, thank you for the question. So these elements are a movable horizontal screen. So during those 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock intense afternoon events when the sun is just beating on the interior and everybody's running as far back into the building as they can to get away from that heat gain, at that edge, what we've developed here is a moving screen. So each one of these elements, much like a multi-sliding glass door, these guys can all stack either here. They can stack wherever they want to stack in that configuration.
Is that screening the same design as the screening on the? Okay.
No. So this is horizontal, and it's the same. It's the same as these elements. So these warm elements that you see in other aspects of the project, that's occurring in here. So if you go to the screen that's happening on the north edge of the elevated catwalks, that's seen as a special material, and we appreciate the idea that pushing it in and out can give it some additional relief, and we'll study that. I think it's a good suggestion.
Okay, any other questions for the applicant? If not, thank you, Lance, on the
welcome.
marathon of questions.
Oh, I have one more
Oh.
question. Sorry.
Okay,
On the site plan, on the east end of the project, near the parking, there appears to be like a turnout, or is that a area for parallel parking? Right there, yeah.
Right here?
Yes.
Yeah, that was required by the fire department. So when they come and they put the outriggers out, they needed that additional, what is it, 4 feet? Yeah. So they just needed that additional space, and they said, you can stick it anywhere along there. We'll bring the equipment in, we'll get the outriggers out, and it could have been in the middle here, but then it starts to pinch. We had the ability to push this in a little bit. It works out really well for us, but yeah, it's the fire department asking for a little extra
It'll
space.
be one of those spaces people aren't sure to park there or not park there. It'll be striped, okay. Maybe decorative paving or something.
yeah, I agree.
Thanks, Lance.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to start comments with Member John.
Thank you for the presentation. I know the Planning Commission will be addressing parking. The shading in the parking area, I don't know that we're going to meet our 50% with what is shown. I like Member Song's, or Chair Song's suggestion of some more trees on the other side. If that, creating a rhythm and a pattern and slowing down traffic, that's a useful tool. In the main courtyard area, poolside, the demographics of this hotel, I would think, lean towards family, and while younger folks love the sun, I think there's excessive amounts of sun and heat buildup in the public spaces, that if you're having grandma playing with the grandkids, they may want to be in some more shaded areas. So looking at softness and heat and some shading would be my comments.
Thank you, John. Member Robert. Okay. Member Tom from Dozy.
Okay. I think, well, I heard it in the presentation, but I don't think I see it on the plan. And that's a stronger integration of the landscape with the architecture and the site plan. So what I would like to see is some blow-ups or clarification of the pool area and those patios or walkways adjacent to it. If you just look at the site plan and you take the two colors there, the darker being walkways, but then there's also areas of the lighter that show gates, like they're almost walkways. So I think it's a little confusing as to what are potentially landscape areas and what are hardscape areas. So I would like to see that clarified in a blow-up or some details. Mm-hmm. And I think there's opportunities when you look towards the east end of the project. There's an area where there's one tree and then another random area of 3 trees, but there looks like there's areas of landscape missing that appear to be delineated as landscape or planter areas. And those are, the planter area north of the pool. It looks to be a planter, but there's nothing in it. Just like north of the, and then also the areas, there's additional areas south of the lawn area where there's some trees, and then a whole like buffer area as you go further east. That whole east end, between Encilia and there's just no landscape on that end of the project at all. There's a light color area that looks like it could be a planter, and then it looks like a walkway adjacent to the angle parking. So again, I think there needs to be some blow up or detailing of those areas. Because when you get into a project with this kind of density, and you need to take advantage of all the small areas you have, but it does need to be delineated on a plan. And then also the delineation of where the decorative paving would be at the entries. And I think even if it wasn't a change in elevation where those main walkways are, going across to the parking could be a nice breakup of, unless they do the whole drive aisle and pavers would look nice. So it makes it more of an auto court than just a paved parking lot. And then also adjacent to the event area, there's a kind of a more desert style or random landscape area. So where everything's structured, I'm not sure the purpose of that. Is there benches in there? Is that going to be utilized? But it just seems a little foreign to some of the other geometry that he's establishing through the trees. So just some clarification on those areas.
Thank you, Tom. Okay. Member Tom.
I like the architecture very much. I think the west elevation towards Indian Canyon is very handsome. I disagree with staff about the placement of the storage room just because the massing of it is perfect, fitting into the elevation. I think now that I understand the use of it, that it's not something that people go to daily, it makes sense. I would suggest that on the east side of that massing, instead of those doors just being set bang in the stone, that wall be offset somewhat back so that the doors are in their own little wall away from being kind of trying to chisel them into the stone. I love the way the overhang at that first level at the porte cochere wraps down but then comes along Indian and then goes up and wraps around the second floor. I think that really is a strong, nice element. But I totally agree with Chairwoman Song's comment that balcony rail just takes away from the uniqueness of that. And so I think we really need to look at a different solution for that balcony rail. I think the comments I made about the north side could clean that up if we had a little break in and out to the screens and the walls. I'm a bit concerned that the very east elevation facing Encilia is so tall and somewhat flat. It's kind of in your face for the people across the street there. And my biggest concern, and I know we're not in charge of parking, but as the Planning Commission looks at it, there's really only 40 parking spaces on site. The 9 on Encilia, there's no way to control if the public uses those or if the guests of the hotel use those, especially seeing that half of the distance of those are in the public right-of-way. And my fear to the staff and commission is that when this goes to planning, if they're going to require additional parking, all of our discussions about the architecture are kind of moot because they might have to make some pretty significant revisions to the layout. But overall, I think it's a beautiful building.
I agree with Tom. I think the architecture is stronger than the site and the landscape design. And so I have about several comments that are going to enhance the project, but the issue is that we can list the comments and then see how the committee feels about moving the project forward. But I do think that the hardscape design, the landscape design needs to take it to the next level as the architecture is. And so do we separate them so that they can proceed to planning and then have landscape come back, or other options that comes along with that. So I think we're in agreement on the number of issues that are going to enhance the project. I think it's more about the strategy of, I understand the project is sort of in a fast track pace, and to be able to move this along and knowing that there are professional designers part of this. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say that, but we know that good work is going to be an outcome of this.
Madam Chair, if I might interject here, based on the comments that I've heard thus far, it seems to be the primary issues as you've listed them are wanting to see additional details on the landscape and the hardscape with a couple of minor modifications to the landscape plan itself in terms of additional shade trees and so forth. Also, there seems to be a concern with the treatment of the screen elements on the north elevations and how those relate to the balcony elements, and then also on the front of the building relative to the balcony railing there. Those seem to be the primary concerns that you have. Based on those comments, what I might recommend, if you feel comfortable sending this forward to the Planning Commission, what you might want to do as a condition of approval is to have those items come back to the AAC specifically for review and approval prior to the issuance of building permits. And so that your recommendation to the Planning Commission would be approval of the project with the conditions that the landscape treatment, the hardscape treatment, the shade screens on the north elevation and the balcony railings on the west elevation come back to the AAC for review and approval.
Oh yeah, I would modify to have a little few more details on those 4 items because we like to be more specific. But that's in general. I think the so my motion, even though I'm not. My motion that I am strongly suggesting one of us to make is to exactly do what Flynn has outlined for us. And so those items would be in the enhanced landscape design, that additional boulders as the applicant has proposed to create more of a separation between the bar as well as Indian Canyon, to add more palm trees so that enhances the layout of those trees inside the courtyards, and therefore be able to shade them more and then be able to soften more. I think the hardscape design is definitely necessary, but we also need to understand the concept of really 3 areas of the area outside the bar to the east, the landscape break that happens in between the pool and that bar, and then the landscape that happens on Encilia. Shade screens. With the screens is that if there is electrical lighting being proposed to float or hollow, create that 3D-dimensionality, that should be included as well. And one thing I forgot on the hardscape is that if we could really be able to understand how the pathways of private, public, as well as the patrons that are going to be there is going to function, that's going to help us to understand the circulation of the site. Have I mentioned?
Can I add one?
Yes.
I think it would be important to add a specific drop-off pickup place for Uber and taxis and things, because that is how most people are going to be coming in. If you're going to have less parking because of people using Uber, I think we need to accommodate Uber so they're not blocking the driveway. You can't assume Indian Avenue curbside is going to be available because that's just public parking. So I think it would be important to have a place where that function can happen.
Very good. Okay. Anybody wants to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that the project go forward to the Planning Commission, and that the Architectural Advisory Committee, be able to see further details, both of the architecture and the landscape elements as noted.
Okay. Very good. John, would you like to second that?
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, should we move to the next case real quick? Sign Development, Inc., on behalf of Michael Hoffman, owner, for a determination on canopy signage located at 4875 East Ramon Road. Staff report, please.
Okay, as soon as it opens. There we go. Thank you, Chair. This is a unique request for the AAC. It is to determine if what the proposal is a sign or not a sign. In the past, the planning staff has reviewed sign permit applications that have gone before the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission has determined that lighting can be used or delineated as a sign. And that is what is here before you today. The Shell station on the corner of Gene Autry Trail and East Ramon Road is requesting that a light element be added to the canopy above the pumps. Currently, there is a yellow stripe and then a red stripe that is non-illuminated, that's acrylic, that runs along the bottom of the canopy. They're also requesting additional signs within the service station, but before you today is just a determination if the illuminated red stripe that will run along the canopy be considered a sign. In your staff report, there are some photographs of the existing conditions. I don't have a copy of them for the slides, so you may want to refer to them to see what it looks like currently today. So before you in this first slide is an example of the red stripe that will go along the bottom of the canopy, and they're also asking for a new Shell logo sign that staff is working with them to see if it complies to design standards as far as signs above that go above the canopy, which this one obviously does. So the AEC can make a few determinations today. It can determine that the shade canopy is a sign as defined by the zoning code and recommend that the applicant be allowed to keep the existing illuminated stripe as a legal non-conforming sign, or a sign modifying it only as necessary to install the new Shell logo sign. Or the AEC can determine that the proposed new illuminated red stripe is a sign, or you can determine that the red stripe is not a sign. So we are seeking a recommendation to the planning director to determine if the red stripe, if the AEC views the illuminated red stripe as a sign. As I mentioned earlier, there is precedent. The Planning Commission determined that the Chase Bank at the Smoke Tree Commons, they came in to request that LED lighting be placed in the windows of the Chase Bank in a blue color that's associated with the bank's corporate branding. And the AEC determined that the window lighting was considered a sign and recommended denial. So the planning staff is here to ask you today if the AEC feels that the illuminated red stripe at the bottom of a canopy of a service station should be considered as a sign. If it is, then the amount of signage that is requested would require a sign variance and would have to go before the Planning Commission as a sign variance. So that concludes my report.
Thank you. Questions for staff?
No. Okay.
Okay, Glenn.
Yes.
I'm gonna break it down one more time, okay?
All right.
Okay, so there's a red painted fascia. It exists today,
Yes.
okay? The applicant would like to light that red,
Illuminated with LED behind it.
and that would require a signage variance.
That's left up to you to determine that.
Right, okay. Second, they have a logo
Yes.
Okay.
Requesting that Shell logo.
to be illuminated.
Yes.
Okay, and that would also be part of the signage
Yes.
requirement.
Yes.
Okay, that's 2. Okay, 3 is that currently they have the yellow and the red painted on the fascia.
Currently, and that's permitted.
That's permitted. Okay, and then currently, I don't remember. Is there lighting along the fascia?
There is not. That's
Okay.
where they're asking to light it.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay, is the applicant present? Okay, would you like to care to make your points?
My name is Mina Brentham. I'm with Sign Development, 1366 West 9th Street, Upland, California. Currently, I do believe that the red light is illuminated around the existing fascia. And they're just looking to change that out to the new updated shell image. And it's going to be the LED lighting now. The signage for the canopy, currently it says shell. It's going to be reduced down. We're working with staff. I believe that we're allowed 10 square feet of signage on the canopy. So those two logos are going to be reduced down to probably around 27 inches to make them 5 square feet so we can have 2 of them.
Chair, so let me correct, yes. So it says, I apologize, this is Ken's project and he is out. So it does say that they want to keep the existing illuminated stripe as a legal non-conforming sign.
Okay.
We're not asking to have anything more than what we have now. We just want the updated shell image. It's illuminated now. There's a yellow there's the yellow fascia. The red bar is illuminated. The red bar will be illuminated just a little bit different. It's going to be LEDs now.
So, Madam Chair, to assist in your deliberations here today, we don't have copies of permits for the signage, the previous sign package that the building currently employs. And so, again, we don't have any indication of permits for the illumination that may be there on the canopy. What we are asking for you all as the AAC to determine today is, does the red illumination, the red neon or LED banding around the canopy constitute signage based on our definition of signage as that's described in your staff report? If you determine that it is not signage, then it would remain in place. The applicant will go forward with the rest of their sign package, and that may result in them needing to file a variance application, which would then be considered by the Planning Commission. If you determine that it is signage, the red banding is signage, then they would also include that in their sign package as the variance application goes to the Planning Commission. But again, just based on staff's interpretation, that illumination, as it is included in the definition of a sign, constitutes signage, that would need to be accounted for in their overall sign square footage. We have taken these issues, as Mr. Malacker indicated before, to the AAC to get a determination if really this illumination constitutes signage or not. Does it call attention to the brand or the products being offered?
Yes, questions for staff, Member Robert?
So when we reviewed the Porsche dealership, and they had the red illuminations that were part of it, it was really never considered as part of a sign, and yet that is calling attention to the building and the brand.
Slightly different situation in staff's interpretation, in that the illumination was an integral feature of the architecture of the building and is not necessarily a corporate color that Porsche uses in all of their marketing materials. It was specific to the building and to the design of the building.
Okay.
Okay, other questions for staff? Okay, no public comments. There's nobody here, so questions for the applicant? Yes, Member John.
So the existing red banding is illuminated.
Correct.
What is the source of illumination?
I couldn't tell you that.
Okay. And the proposed illumination,
Would be LED illuminated.
and is that individual lamps? Is that tape lighting? Is
No,
that,
it will look like a continuous bar as it does now.
so the actual product that will be used, I'm trying to get a sense of brightness now versus brightness in the future.
I believe that there should be a detail on your drawings. There should be towards the back.
Wanna look at this one?
Yeah.
It shows how it's illuminated at night.
If you look at this right here, canopy detail, you can see here's the illuminated red bar. It's going to be going across.
What page are you on?
It doesn't show, but it shows canopy
Oh.
detail number 1.
It's highlighted.
It's this one.
It's got yellow.
just a reminder to speak directly into the microphones.
Thank you.
It's the fourth page from the end.
But that's the actual signage, the logo.
Yes, the logo is not what's being questioned today, it's just the red illumination.
So it's gonna sit out proud on this yellow piece.
Yeah, so this is the,
Oh, so it's not,
this is the shell.
okay.
So it's the same kind of lighting that's behind here.
Right. But this is the only thing that we're
Oh, there
here
it
for
is.
today. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't have it on my, it's this thing. This thing here.
So the source of the lighting is actually exposed. Where if you look at the photograph, for example, on the last page, you have this rope lighting underneath the fascia.
Over here. That's
I'm not sure what those dotted lights are.
It almost looks like it's installed on the underside of the fascia, rather than on the face, but then it depends on where the photograph.
It's right at the bottom of the fascia. That fascia is kind of curved a little bit.
Okay, well,
Okay.
you answered my question. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, John. Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you. We will deliberate.
Thanks.
Not so simple, huh? Not so simple. Okay, I'll start with Member Tom Dorsey.
You know, there's buildings all over the world that lighting is an integral part of the architecture. However, in this situation, and I think it's a great gas station. It says gas station, it says Shell and all of that. You might remember when it was first built. But I think since the color that they're choosing is so integral to their logo and brand and everything, I would read it as a part of the sign.
Okay, Member Tom, take away.
I think when you look on the last page, the nighttime image, where you just see the red bars, to me, that definitely defines it as a sign. It's something that pulls attention to the building, tells you that the business is there. If it were just a painted stripe, of course, the sky is never black like this around this building because it's on a very busy intersection and
Correct.
you will see the colors. But I think looking just specifically at this instance, to me, that's a sign.
Okay, Member John?
I would agree that it is a sign based on branding. I would go that direction.
Okay, so if the majority of us is saying that this is a sign, then therefore we have to make the next determination. Are we going to allow this so that they can have an increase, a modification in our signage? Or therefore we're not going to allow it and therefore they have to meet the signage requirements?
Based on your discussion thus far, if a majority of the members feel that it is a sign, then we will have to include it in the overall area for signage for the property. And so we don't really need you to do anything more than that, is to just make a determination on whether or not it's a sign. If you do make that determination, then again, what we'll have the applicant do is apply for a variance, and they will include that red banding as part of their overall sign area. So
Okay.
again, all we're asking for is just a determination, is this a sign or is it inconsequential to the overall branding and signage of the property?
So, because Because it's going in that direction, so would the motion be that the committee believes that this is part of the signage?
That's all you would need to do is
Okay.
indicate that you identify this as being a sign, and so consequently, it must be calculated as such.
Okay, and so I make that motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Member John, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you very much. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, yes. Okay, any comments from the members as we are coming back to the fall of 2018? Yes, Member Tom?
Flynn, is there a requirement on presentations on the size and scale? The stuff that we were looking at on the hotel was so hard to read, and I knew on my computer it would be tough, but when we got here it wasn't any easier, and I think it kind of did them a disservice. If we could see stuff, and where Tom was saying some blow-ups of different areas or something, I think could be very helpful for us and make it more understandable for the applicants.
We don't have minimum requirements for the submittal materials that we receive for applications, but I understand that you all, as a reviewing body, need to be able to read dimensions and need to be able to clearly see plant materials, et cetera, et cetera. What I will do is I'll ask my staff to be very conscientious as we take applications in to make sure that we have materials that our AAC members and Planning Commission members can read and interpret and apply criteria to. So I appreciate that comment and thank you for bringing
I
that
think a
up.
project as big as that to be turned in on 11 by 17s was kind of asking a lot of us.
Okay.
I think,
It just gets all blurry,
yeah, I think what happens is that the actual application, when we used to do it in the chamber, is that they put the 24 by 36 or 30 by 42 exhibit. So then we were able to see it at that point. I think what happens is when we get the links, it's the links of the reduced version. So even though we blow it up, it
You
looks
still can't read it.
pixelated.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and I think a lot of times it's intuitive when you're putting a presentation together that, hey, I need to blow up this area, and you kind of know going in that there's elements that would help the project move forward to make it clearer for the committee.
It's true, yeah. Other comments from the committee? Otherwise, I'll pass it to the director.
I, again, welcome back from your summer vacation. Hope everyone enjoyed themselves. We don't have any major announcements for the Architectural Advisory Committee other than we are scheduled for our next meeting on September the 17th. I believe Kenny will also be absent on the 17th as well. And I'll see if Steve and Sheila could attend in his place. But again, if you are going to be absent, please let us know. I did receive an email from Mr. Lockyer indicating that he wasn't going to be able to make it today. He was delayed, had intended to be here, but unfortunately could not make it. So I do appreciate that email from Mr. Lockyer. But other than that, I don't have any additional announcements for you at this time.
Okay, it's 4:39 and we're adjourned. Thank you.